Wireless project, finalizing WAP placement. By the time you're done here, you will understand how to properly install wireless access points in a client environment. Now, before we go on site and start installing some wireless access points, I want to hit some key points of what we're aiming to do as we place a wireless access point. First off, at our location, we want to achieve a minimum signal strength of -67 dB, or sometimes -70 dB is okay. -67 is really the guideline that you want to go with if you're doing any real-time communication over Wi-Fi, like voice over IP over Wi-Fi, or video streaming or video collaboration. And that's really pushing it, meaning I've been in environments where it's a -67, even 65, et cetera, and it's not good. I mean, that really is scraping by. -70 works if you're starting to do web, just web surfing, email, essentially traffic that is not time-based and can correct itself, TCP-based traffic. You want to minimize your signal overlap when you're placing your wireless access point. Now, this is, of course, the ideal bubbly looking design of a 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. Now, remember, we only have 3 clean channels in that 2.4. And if we have a single floor in a wide open environment with no other interference coming in, then this would work out great. It doesn't work that way in the real world. You always end up with some kind of overlap. And that's why we like to go with the 5 gigahertz cells, is because depending on what area you're in and what bands you're using, there's plenty of channels that you can overuse and reuse. And likewise, this signal doesn't travel as far as the 2.4 gigahertz space. So we actually can block those things off and isolate the cells much more than this far traveling 2.4. It's kind of funny that the ability of a wireless signal to reach farther is actually a bad thing in most Wi-Fi environments. You want to ensure your signal to noise ratio is greater than 20 dB. You might remember this image from a number of nuggets ago. I just grabbed a screen cap right out of that nugget. And right down at the bottom, I was talking about this pit of molten lava. That's your noise floor. And it's kind of overwritten right here, but that's a -100, -90 right here. So I would say our noise floor is really where we start seeing that signal goop down at the bottom. So we're probably at a -105 here. So when I'm looking to have a signal to noise ratio greater than 20 dB, what I do is I take that noise floor. Let's just say we have a signal strength of -67, a noise floor of 105, and I simply subtract them. Now, this logically doesn't make sense. It just leads to simple math. 105 minus 67 is a signal to noise ratio of 38 dB, which is perfectly acceptable in our case. Again, the greater your signal and the lower your noise, the better your overall signal to noise ratio. Last but not least, we want to make sure our cells overlap at least 20%, whatever that means. That's a guideline, but when you're on site, you're not sitting there going, this is definitely about a 20% overlap. You just want to make sure that you can see enough of this signal from 2 adjacent cells so that as somebody roams between wireless access points, they don't drop the wireless signal. You also want to make sure that those cells are non-competing channels. Again, very difficult in the 2.4 gigahertz space, much easier in the 5. Now, when you're on site, you're going to take your best stab at placing WAPs. Now, you might look at this and say, what do you mean best stab? I thought we did our, quick and dirty survey plus the Ekahau scientific survey, so we know where to go. Well, yeah, sure. On a floor plan, that's exactly what it looks like. But when it literally comes to drilling into a ceiling tile, you're kind of like, right about here looks good, right? So you install your WAPs in those locations, walk the building, and create a heat map, meaning do an active survey. This is where you not only gather the signal, that's known as a passive survey, to see where the signal goes, but you actually have some kind of network traffic test running in the background. That could be a bandwidth test, could be just an active ping to make sure that you are not only getting good connectivity in theory, that's the passive survey, but literally you're passing network traffic as you move around the building. Once you come back from an active survey, then you move your WAPs around, rinse and repeat, meaning do another active survey. Okay, does this look good? Okay, did we avoid that big metal wall of electric equipment that I didn't see there previously? Am I getting a good signal over here where I didn't before? Those kind of questions what you're asking. Now down here, I'm also mentioning you should schedule a resurvey because you'll forget if you don't. What do I mean by that? I mean that wireless changes. There's tenants that come and go in buildings. There's buildings aside this, adjacent to this, that people move in and they deploy their own wireless network, and that causes competing signals. I mean, there's adjustments that will have to be made to your wireless network over time. So schedule a resurvey date to come back out there. Now, for some organizations, that might be once a year. For some organizations, like I know hospitals, It is literally a once a week event. There are companies that's all they do is once a week they come out and do resurveys of that wireless deployment at a hospital and make adjustments because there's so many things in that environment that get introduced. Last thing to mention before we go on site and do this is that a building under construction is half a story, meaning walking into a building that doesn't have anything in it except maybe drywall and doing a passive survey and putting your wireless access points in place is useful, meaning it's half a story, it's 50%, but know that that is going to change drastically once people move in, once you figure out where people are going to be sitting, once furniture arrives. So while you may be successful doing a deployment before all that happens, chances are pretty good there'll be areas of the building that are weak because some disruptive force was installed. If you are doing the installation before people arrive, which is actually a nice quiet installation to do, always make sure you come in after people arrive and do a resurvey. So what I'm going to do now is go back on site to the customer, show you the wireless access point that we're going to install and all the hardware that goes with it, then actually do the wireless installation right about there. All right, if there's any sound quality issues, you have to forgive me. I forgot to bring my microphone along this journey. So I wanted to show you, before we put it up in the ceiling, what comes with a typical wireless access point that we can mount. First off, this is a Ubiquiti wireless access point, but they're all just about the same. They have the same kind of mounting gear. On the back of it, it's got a removable plate. And you can see I twist that. It comes off right here. Now, this is what actually mounts to a wall. And if you're going directly into a wall, like you're going horizontal with this, you'll just use some drywall anchors and put them in there and zip some screws right in there. Now, if you're going with a ceiling mount, which a lot of businesses will use, where they'll actually have it in the tile at the top of the ceiling, what you'll do is you'll also combine it with something that looks like this. Let me yank it out of the wrapper. And what you'll notice on this guy is that it's got a sharp metal edge coming around the end here. That's allowing you to push it up into that soft ceiling, if you will, that cardboard-ish ceiling on the drop ceiling, and mount it right there. Now, this actually comes from the top of the ceiling. So imagine that this right here is your ceiling. This comes from the top of it, and it screws into this piece that's on the bottom. The reason you want that is because those drop ceilings really are just nothing but cardboard. So you want some kind of bracing to keep that wireless access point and the screws that hold it up in there from falling through. So this ends up screwing right into this on the top of that ceiling right there. Once that's in place, you can take your wireless access point and go click. Now, one of the things that you'll notice about this metal ring is that it has this little circle right here. That's designed for the Ethernet cable, because on the wireless access point itself, you have right here the Ethernet connections on the bottom of it. When I take my Ethernet cable and run it in through that, it can then fish down into that. You just want to be aware of that before you mount it up there. We're going about to head in there and do it, because you don't want to fix everything and then go to mount it and you go, oh, nothing lines up, right? Now, inside of this wireless access point, I see that I have a main /48 volt. So this is where it's going to receive the incoming Ethernet cable. And there's a little piece right here that comes off on the wireless access point to fish that Ethernet cable in between there. And that's going to be also where it supplies the power over Ethernet connection that gives this thing its power. Now, right next to that, you see the secondary connection. That's a pass-through to where you can actually have the main connection coming in here and then daisy chain some other device from that wireless access point. Last but not least, we have a power injector. This is if your switch does not support power over Ethernet. This allows you to have the incoming line from the switch go into the LAN, and then the outbound line, the PoE, goes to the actual WAP. You take this, plug it into a wall outlet, and now you've got a power over Ethernet injector, adding power to the line to make sure that WAP gets power. All right, now the cable has already been run to this location, so our first job is to get this ceiling tile down. You can actually mount a wireless access point directly in the ceiling tile with it up there, but it's a lot more work to try and do that. So I usually take the ceiling tile and bring it down to the floor where we can mount the WAP and then put it back up on the ceiling. There we go. Looking at the ventilation that's now hanging out of the ceiling, I would say this is the wrong ceiling tile to remove. Let's move the ladder over a bit. All right, here we go. Attempt number 2.
Hi, Mom.
Nice. Now, I did want to show you this before I got down from the ceiling. We ran the Ethernet cable up to this location, and you notice we crimped an end on it right here. That's one method that you could do. The drawback of doing that is if this clip ever breaks off or anything like that, you're up here cutting it and punching it down and things like that.
Another method that you could do is install a box, on top of one of these mounted just with a little keystone jack right here where we can then run a patch cable into the wireless access point itself. That way, if that patch cable ever gets broken, it's a very easy thing to replace. All right, so what I've done is I've set that ceiling tile right here across 2 chairs, and I'm just going to take a simple jab saw and put a hole right into it that allows that Ethernet cable to pass through. Now, if you don't have a jab saw on you, that's fine. You can just use a flathead screwdriver, a Phillips screwdriver, or whatever. This stuff really is just cardboard, so you just need something pokey enough to poke through. And since we crimped that Ethernet cable onto the end of it, we want to make sure that the hole is large enough for that tip to pass through as well. Sometimes you might want to wait if you're going to put a tip on it until after you put this hole in place so that you can just run the cable through and make for a smaller hole. All right, this is where that metal ring comes into place. I'm going to position it right over that hole that I just poked in this ceiling tile. I'm going to push down on it slightly, but not too hard because that'll snap the ceiling tile right in half. But I'm going to put some pressure on there to put that sharp edge a little deeper into that ceiling tile. This will provide the backing that's needed to put this plate on the other side, which is what the wireless access point will actually attach to. So I flipped the ceiling tile over and you can see the hole that I poked in it right here. I'm going to take this plastic piece and line up that hole in the plastic piece, which is where the Ethernet cable is going to come through. Then I've got my hardware right here that I'm going to dump out so you can see it all. These long screws are what I'm going to end up using to poke through that and mount on that metal ring on the other side. Just apply some gentle pressure. 2 and 3. Voila! Then I'm going to scoot all this hardware off, flip the ceiling tile over. Alright, so now I've flipped this over and you can see the 3 screws sticking up right there. I'm going to take this metal plate with the sharp edge down, pushing into there, and put that over these 3 screws so that they'll stay in place. Then I have these bolts that screw right on top of there so that this thing doesn't pull back through. So we'll screw those on. And flip it over. And attach our wireless access point. It twists and snaps right into place. And now we've got a ceiling tile with a wireless access point that's fixed on there. Now obviously we're not going to leave it that way as we put it back up there because we still have to put our Ethernet cord through. That's going to come through this hole. Pull that Ethernet cable through the hole. Voila! Now we grab our wireless access point, walk it back up, attach the Ethernet cable, and there we have it. Our first wireless access point installed and ready to configure.
Well, I mentioned at the beginning of this nugget that you will understand how to properly install wireless access points in a client environment. So now I want you to do it, and I'm serious about this. Go mount some wireless access points. Now I know you're thinking, well, where do I do that at? I'm telling you, go to relatives' homes, vacation homes, small businesses, your outdoor patio, because you need Wi-Fi out there. And don't look at me like I'm crazy. I literally did this 4 days ago. This is October 20th. Today's the 24th. I went up to a friend's cabin to install video surveillance. So while I was up there, I mounted a wireless access point outside. This is actually an AC mesh wireless access point, so it's got that good outdoor signal for that entire cabin area. And there's my video surveillance that I configured, at least one of the cameras. And here's the little MDF I configured inside of his cabin. It's not pretty, but it's functional. I used a horizontally mounted wireless access point to supply signal through the whole cabin. If you sit down and think, there's 1,000 projects like that you can do. Throw yourself into it. Seeing that horizontally mounted WAP made me think of one more thing I want to squeeze in here at the end, and that's the idea of polarization. The antennas in your wireless access points are polarized, meaning they have to send their radio signal either horizontally or vertically to align with the receiver, which is typically a smartphone or a laptop or something like that, which also is polarized to receive a signal horizontally, vertically, and all that. Now, if you mount your wireless access point on an angle, like you don't have some screws, so you just lean it against the wall like that, and it's kind of sending it out, the signal will still reach the device and it will still work. However, it will never be as good as if you had it correctly mounted to receive the right polarization. Most of our indoor WAPs have 2 antennas inside of them, polarized on different radiuses, one horizontally and one vertically, which allows you to mount it on that ceiling or mount it on that wall and receive just as good of a wireless signal at the client device. This is especially important if you're setting up point-to-point wireless, where you mount a dish or a WAP on the side of a building that shoots the signal potentially miles or kilometers to some other building far away. If the polarization is off on those devices, you'll see some major degradation to the point where you probably won't even receive a signal. I've also seen some creative situations where people purposely mount their devices on a weird polarization. As long as they mount it the same way on both sides, they can actually shoot that radio signal on an angle that isn't interfered with by other radio waves. I'm telling you, polarization is that concept that opens the door and makes you think, man, maybe I didn't know everything I thought I did about wireless. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.